My dad quickly kicked me out after I renovated in their house. "Your sister will live here," my dad said. So I left and didn't say anything, and when they found out 48 hours later that I should have known better. Looking back, it was obvious. My parents had always been the type to take without giving back, to act as if generosity was a favor rather than a responsibility. But I ignored it because at the time I still believed that family was supposed to help each other. When I hit a rough patch financially, I didn't immediately panic. My contract job had ended suddenly, and although I had savings, they wouldn't last forever. Rent, bills, and everything else were piling up, and I needed a way to stay afloat. Moving back in with my parents seemed like the best option, at least for a few months. They had the space, and when I brought it up, they agreed without hesitation. But there was a catch. The house needed work. My dad made it sound like a perfect deal. If I helped fix the place up, I could stay rent-free. I had some renovation experience, and the bedroom I was to move into was in serious need of repair. The walls were cracked, the carpet was old and stained, the door was broken, and the entire hallway leading to the room was a disaster. My dad pitched it as if I was doing me a favor. "You get to stay here, and we'll finally make this house look decent. Everybody wins." So I agreed. I worked non-stop for almost 2 months. Mornings started early, and most nights I was up late, covered in dust and paint, sore from kneeling on hardwood floors. I ripped up the old carpet and installed laminate flooring. I filled cracks, painted the walls, replaced the broken door, and built shelves into the walls for storage. The hallway needed more work, replacing light fixtures, fixing creaky floorboards, repainting, and patching sections of the ceiling where the plaster had begun to peel. At first I used whatever materials were lying around, but it soon became clear that if I wanted to do the job right, I would have to buy most of the supplies myself. My parents never offered to pay for it, and I didn't push them. I told myself it didn't matter because I was investing in my own space. So, over time, I spent $3,700 on materials, flooring, paint, wood, tools, everything. I never tracked it too closely because in my mind it was worth it. I thought I was building something for myself. I should have known better. The day I finally finished, my dad pulled me aside. My mom was standing next to him with that blank expression she always had when she was about to back up whatever nonsense he was about to say. I assumed they were going to thank me, maybe acknowledge the work I'd put in. Instead, my dad just came right out and said it. "We've decided that your sister is going to live here." I was waiting for some kind of explanation, a joke, anything that would make sense. But they were serious. I looked at my mom and she nodded like it was the most logical thing in the world. I laughed, but they didn't. "What do you mean?" "We talked about it, and it makes more sense. She needs the space more than you do," my dad said. My sister. The same sister who already had a perfectly good apartment with her boyfriend. The same sister who hadn't been around for months, who hadn't lifted a finger to help with the renovations. I asked when they had made this decision. My dad shrugged. "We've been thinking about it for a while. It's nothing personal." "Not personal." "Right." I looked at the room. The room I had put almost 2 months of work into. The room I had spent nearly $4,000 on. The thought of fighting them crossed my mind, telling them they were being selfish, demanding they at least pay me back for the materials. But I knew them. Arguing would be pointless. They had already made up their minds. So I didn't say a word. I just turned around and started packing what little I had. I had slept in the living room during the renovation, expecting to move into the finished room when it was finished. But now I wasn't welcome. I could tell they expected me to fight. Maybe they wanted me to. Maybe they thought I'd beg them to reconsider. But I wasn't going to give them that satisfaction. I left without another word. What they didn't know was that in 48 hours they would regret it all. When I left, I had no plan. No backup. Just my truck, a few bags, and the heavy realization that I had spent almost 2 months of my life working for people who had no problem kicking me out the second it suited them. But I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I just walked away. I drove for hours with no destination, replaying everything in my head. The sweat, the exhaustion, the money I had spent, $3,700 gone, just like that. My parents never even acknowledged it. They watched me pour my time and savings into their house and acted like it was nothing. That night, I parked outside a 24-hour gas station and slept in my truck. It was cramped and uncomfortable, but it was mine. That was more than I could say for the house I had just left behind. The next morning I knew I had to come up with something. My savings were low and I didn't want to waste what little I had on a motel. I started reaching out to people to see if anyone had a couch I could crash on. Most of my friends lived too far away or had their own stuff going on, but then I remembered Mike, an old coworker I used to be close with. I called him up, explained the situation without too many details, and he didn't even hesitate. "Dude, come over. Stay as long as you need to." So I drove over to Mike's house, about an hour away. The second I walked in, he handed me a beer and didn't ask any questions. That was exactly what I needed. Then, 48 hours after I left, everything changed. My phone started blowing up. Missed calls from my dad. Texts from my mom. Even my sister, who rarely texted me, had sent multiple messages. I ignored them at first. Let them sit. But the more notifications I got, the more curious I became. Then my cousin Sarah texted me. "Dude, what did you do? Your parents are freaking out." I frowned and replied, "What are you talking about?" Her answer came almost immediately. "They won't tell me, but they're losing their minds. My mom said your dad is talking about getting lawyers involved? WTF?" That made me pause. Lawyers? What the hell were they talking about? Then I saw another message from my dad. "You better fix this. Now." I stared down at my phone, completely confused. I hadn't done anything. I had left without a word, I hadn't touched their house, I hadn't done any damage. I had left, and that was it. So why were they panicking? I leaned back in Mike's chair and thought about it. And then, slowly, it hit me. It wasn't what I had done. It was what I had taken. And the moment they realized what was missing, they knew they had fooled themselves. I ignored their messages for hours. Let them sit in whatever mess they had created for themselves. But the texts kept coming, and soon my sister started calling too. That was unusual. She barely ever reached out, even when things were normal. I let it go to voicemail, but curiosity got the better of me. I wanted to know exactly what was going on. Instead of calling her back, I texted Sarah. "Okay, tell me what's happening." She responded almost instantly. "Your sister showed up to move in and lost it. Your dad is pissed. Mom's crying. Everyone's freaking out." I smirked. Good. I knew my sister well enough to picture the scene. She probably showed up with her boyfriend, expecting a perfectly finished bedroom, only to realize she had walked into a disaster. And the best part? I hadn't done a thing. I had left the house exactly as it was. The floors were installed. The shelves were built. The lights were working. Everything was done, just as I had planned. So what went wrong? I texted Sarah again. "What's the problem?" Her response made me laugh out loud. "Apparently, the house stinks." I blinked. "What?" "Yeah. Your sister said there's this horrible smell in the bedroom and hallway, like something died in there. She freaked out and refused to move in." Now, that was unexpected. I frowned, thinking back. I had done all the work myself. There was no way I had left anything behind that could cause a smell like that. But then, something clicked. The flooring. The hallway and bedroom had water damage before I started renovations. That's why I had to rip out the old carpet. Underneath, the subfloor had been damp and slightly rotted in some places. I told my dad we needed to replace it completely, but he refused. Said it was too expensive, and told me to just lay the new flooring over it. I argued, but in the end, I did what he wanted. Now, 48 hours later, after being sealed under laminate flooring, That moisture was probably turning into full-blown mold. And it was coming through. I grinned. They did this to themselves. If they had let me do things the right way, there wouldn't be a problem. But they cut corners, like they always did, and now the smell of rot was seeping through their brand new renovations. Sarah texted again. Your dad's calling contractors to figure out what's wrong. But they said they might have to rip everything out. He's saying you ruined the house. I couldn't stop laughing. The man who kicked me out after using me for free labor, the man who let me pour $3,700 of my own money into his house and then turned around and gave the room to my sister, was now facing thousands of dollars in repairs. And the best part? I didn't owe him a single cent. I sat back, sipping my beer, feeling lighter than I had in weeks. For once, I didn't have to do anything to get even. They had screwed themselves over completely. By the next morning, the texts from my mom had taken a dramatic turn. Gone was the usual guilt-tripping and passive-aggressive nonsense. Now she was begging. Jonathan, please. We really need your help. We didn't realize how bad the damage was. Your dad is overwhelmed. If you could just come back and help finish things, we would really appreciate it. I wasn't stupid. I knew exactly what was happening. My sister had refused to move in, the smell was getting worse, and now, suddenly, they needed me again. I ignored them for a few hours, but then my sister called. I picked up, mostly out of curiosity. Jonathan, listen, she said immediately. I know you're mad, but this is serious. The house is basically unlivable. There's mold or something under the floors. I can't move in until it's fixed. I almost laughed. Not my problem. She sighed. Dad's willing to work something out with you. Can you just come look at it? Work something out. Right. Like how he had. Work something out. Before by kicking me out the second I was done? I wasn't planning on going back, but something about the way she said it made me curious. I wanted to see it. To stand there and watch them struggle with the mess they had made. So I told her, fine. I'll come by. But I'm not promising anything. A couple of hours later, I pulled into the driveway. My dad was already outside, pacing back and forth with his hands on his hips. The second he saw me, he waved me over like nothing had ever happened. Jonathan, good to see you, he said, forcing a smile. Come take a look. I stepped inside, and immediately I smelled it. It was even worse than I imagined. A thick, musty stench filled the hallway, like rotting wood mixed with mildew. The air felt heavy, damp. My sister stood in the doorway to the bedroom, arms crossed, looking miserable. I can't live here, she muttered. It smells disgusting. I stepped farther in, pretending to examine the flooring. I didn't need to, though. I already knew exactly what was wrong. The moisture trapped under the new floors had turned into a full-blown mold infestation. To fix it, they'd have to rip everything out. The flooring I installed? Gone. The hallway repairs? Gone. The shelves? Useless. It wasn't just a small fix anymore. It was a full-scale renovation all over again. My dad cleared his throat. So, here's what we're thinking, he started. You come back, help us tear this up, redo it properly, and this time. He smiled, as if this was some kind of generous offer. We won't kick you out. You can stay as long as you need. I actually laughed. A real, full-bodied laugh. This man, who had used me for free labor, kicked me out without a second thought, let me waste my own money fixing up his house, was now standing here, acting like he was doing me a favor by letting me stay in the home I literally rebuilt. I shook my head. No. His smile faltered. What? No, I repeated. I'm not fixing this. His face turned red. Jonathan, be reasonable. This is your family. We all need to support each other. I just smirked. That's funny. You didn't feel that way 2 days ago. My sister looked away, my mom shifted uncomfortably, but my dad, he was still trying to keep control. We made a mistake. We should have handled things differently. But what's done is done, Are you really going to let your family struggle when you can help? Yes, I said simply. I turned around and walked straight out the door. No yelling. No arguing. No drawn-out fight. Just no. And damn, it felt good. I walked out of that house with a grin on my face, got in my truck, and drove off without looking back. I expected that to be the end of it. I had made my decision, and there was nothing left to say. But my family? They weren't done. I had barely been back at Mike's place for an hour when my phone started blowing up again. I ignored the first few calls, but then Mike, who had been scrolling on his phone, suddenly laughed. Dude, he said, holding up his screen. Your mom just posted on Facebook. I frowned. What? He turned the screen toward me, and there it was. A long, dramatic post from my mom, talking about how her ungrateful son had abandoned his family in their time of need. She didn't name me directly, but it was obvious who she was talking about. She wrote about how they took him in when he had nowhere else to go, and gave him food and shelter, only for him to turn his back on his own family when they needed him the most. She made it sound like I had refused to help out of pure spite, completely skipping over the part where they kicked me out after using me for free labor. The comment section was full of people eating it up. That's awful. Family should always come first. Kids these days have no respect for their parents. I can't believe he would do that to you. Mike scrolled down. Oh, here's the best one. Your aunt saying, "Don't worry, sis, I'll have a talk with him." I sighed. Fantastic. It didn't take long for the text from relatives to start rolling in. My aunt messaged, "Jonathan, how could you do this to your parents? After all they've done for you?" My uncle added, "I don't know what's going on, but whatever it is, just fix it. They're your parents." Even my grandma, who barely knew how to text, sent a shaky, "Why you do this?" I was about to put my phone on silent when Sarah called. I picked up. "Let me guess you saw the post?" She sighed. "Yeah. And it's worse than you think." "How so?" "They're telling people you stole from them." I almost dropped my phone. "What?" "They're saying you left in the middle of renovations and took important materials with you. Like screws, tools, whatever. That's why the house is falling apart." I laughed. Out loud. "They do realize I didn't take a damn thing, right?" "I know," she said. "But that's not the point. They're trying to make you look like the bad guy. And people are eating it up." I shook my head, completely floored. I expected them to be pissed. I expected some guilt tripping. But straight up lying? That was a new low, even for them. Mike leaned back. "So, what are you gonna do?" I thought about it for a second, then smiled. "Nothing." Sarah was silent for a beat. "Seriously?" "Yep," I said. "They want me to react. They want to fight. Not gonna give it to them." Mike grinned. "Damn, that's cold." "I like it." Sarah sighed. "Well, good luck. But, don't be surprised if they try something else." She wasn't wrong. Because less than 24 hours later, my dad showed up at my job. The next day, I was at work, trying to move on with my life, when I looked up and saw my dad standing in the lobby. I almost laughed. Of course he showed up. I worked at a warehouse, managing inventory. It wasn't a fancy job, but it paid the bills, and most importantly, it was mine. A place where they had no control over me. I sighed and walked over. "What are you doing here?" My dad crossed his arms. "We need to talk." I could already see it in his face. He wasn't here to apologize. He was here to lecture me, to pressure me, to act like he still had some kind of authority over me. I didn't even let him start. "Save it," I said. "I'm not coming back. I'm not fixing anything. I'm done." His jaw tightened. "Jonathan, you're being unreasonable. Your mother is sick over this. She hasn't slept since you left." I scoffed. "She slept just fine after kicking me out. Funny how that works. She just wants her family back together." He continued, Ignoring me? We all do. But you've put us in an impossible situation. Do you really think this is fair? I stared at him. Fair? Let's talk about fair, I said. Fair would have been letting me move into the room I renovated. Fair would have been respecting the work I did instead of throwing me out the second I was done. Fair would have been not lying about me online, making me look like some ungrateful thief. His face darkened. We only did that because you forced our hand. I laughed. You forced your own hand. I didn't do anything. You screwed yourselves over, and now you're looking for someone to blame. He sighed, rubbing his forehead. Look, I'm not here to argue. I'm here to fix this. Let's just come up with a solution. There is no solution, I said. You made your choice. Now I'm making mine. His expression shifted. He knew. He could see it in my face. I wasn't budging. Jonathan, he said, lowering his voice, trying one last time. We're still your family. No, I said. You're just people I used to know. He opened his mouth, but I was already walking away. That was it. No yelling. No drawn-out fight. Just done. A week later, I blocked all of them. Changed my number. Moved to a new apartment. Sarah kept me updated for a while, telling me how my parents were playing the victims to everyone who would listen. My dad told the family I had turned my back on them for no reason. My mom cried to relatives about how she didn't know what went wrong. But after a while, I told Sarah to stop updating me. I didn't care anymore. I had spent years bending over backward for people who would never do the same for me. And for the first time in my life, I was free. No more guilt. No more obligations. No more family who only saw me as a tool. And you know what? It felt amazing.